sun is glinting off the skin of that elongated, flexible wing. And you can see she's out over the flat country, that high basin, as if some prehistoric designer had decided, one day I'll let men fool around with the idea of flying, and when I do, I'll let them do it here. Greg, you see from the ground now a fair shot.
It's hard to imagine what these people will be like when they get out. They've been in the plane for 9 days. We've described the cockpit as about the size of a phone booth. They've been bumped and bruised and thrown around in the cabin like a pinball. And they've been through every emotion possible, the highs of knowing that they could make it, to the lows of thinking that it was all doomed and that they would have to land this thing prematurely. So their emotional state may be in question when they get here. I'm sure they will be very emotional to get on the ground and say, hello, Mother Earth.
All right, we're seeing the shot from the ground. We're seeing it from the air.
Okay, now we have them in sight now. Clear view. We have the chase planes on both wings, and there is another chase plane. Behind it, it looks like several hundred yards. We're told that Rutan, who likes to put on a show, he does stunt shows throughout the year, may make a pass over first and then come in for a landing, just to show everybody the beauty of the bird. At this point in time, it's a beautiful bird, but when it took off, everyone was saying how spindly and ugly it was. Two chase planes on the sides, with Voyager in the middle. And it's hard to believe that this plane has been around the world without refueling.
So we're going to get a victory lap, if not a victory roll, over that crowd, Greg.
Right. They were joking yesterday about they may make Voyager do a roll, figure 8, and that way they could claim a record for not only around the world, but the largest figure 8 ever done. And we have it in clear view now. Looks like a bird from our vantage point. The long wings. Started off with 7,000 pounds of fuel, weighing about 11,000 pounds. The body itself without fuel was just a little over 2,000, about the weight of a Volkswagen.
Your good friend? My good friend Dick Rutan.
Sailing in slowly. So that Bert Rutan, the designer of the plane, is in the chase plane on the right. The live shot that we're getting, I believe, is coming from the plane to my left. And you are looking at the left side of the Voyager.
Circle this way.
And he did make a pass over. He seems to be heading back out toward the east as he slowly descends toward the lake bed.
Probably going over and say hello to the folks over at Boron over there to the east.
This button right here on the side.
You know, after living with these people for 9 days and you get to find out what kind of free spirits live here, people were saying that there's no telling what Rutan would do when he got over the lake bed.
You'll let me know when there's something good, huh?
I don't know. There's some speculation about him going for left.
Greg, from the air, we can see that he's well over one of the finished runways now.
Yeah, what they are flying over is what's called the lake bed compass. And from the air, I'm sure that our video or live shot will not show that, but it is a huge compass in the lake bed that is used for landings, night landings, day landings, to help teach pilots how to do so. And I'll have to apologize because the plane is flying right into the sun and I can't see it.
We see it from one of the ground cameras here. It's doing what it has been doing, and that is circling with it.
Dick Rutan is 48 years old. Okay.
Mission with the pilot.
Yeah, exactly. You know, 25,000 miles test on super phone. We should not insult by putting fiberglass over it. Not everybody has to have Selma. Keep you out of range. I'm able to get you 50,000 miles on the car, yeah. The media did cover the Flat Earth Society during your flight, and the last word that the news media told those guys was that pizzas look like basketballs.
What we're doing now is trying to monitor ground-to-air communications on the radio, along with the pilot's conversations from air-to-air, as Voyager makes its way toward the lake bed here at Edwards Air Force Base.
Join your right wing. Okay with me, 3. One and hold down here, like to hear from you. If you feel like talking to them, please do.
Voyager 1, we'll do that.
Ace 2, make that left wing 3. Okay, left wing for 3.
Voyager flight, the first flyby will be solo. The second one will be with Chase, and then you can chase me through the second orbit for lowering the gear. Very similar to what we did at Oshkosh. Acknowledge?
Acknowledge, Dick, I understand that. 2, 3. Where would you like us to wait for you?
Just orbit high inside. It'll be a left 360 on the perimeter of the like this.
2, 3.
The Voyager right now is indicating 80 knots. We're descending at 500 feet a minute. Engines are at idle.
In the sun. Pull it in the sun. Face to the sun.
Okay, Dick, the chases are moving back just a little bit here so that you can have your solo run. And chase 2s and 3, the Duchess is moving back towards you. We'll be with you, Mike. 3.
The Voyager has completed its flight today. They have cut it a little bit close. The airplane has in its feed tank less than 10 gallons of fuel remaining. Mainly due to extremely strong headwinds from Costa Rica to Southern California. All the people from San Jose, Costa Rica, where we made our crossing, and all our good wishes to the people of America. We're very friendly, very hospitable during our crossing of the South American continent, Central American continent.
Yeah, they're over here.
After the crossing, we went seat-led in the Pacific, right off the border of Nicaragua. And then to sea ever since. We coasted in just south of Long Beach, just about an hour and a half ago. See Los Angeles all lit up in the morning.
So as the pilot describes the last moments of his flight and explains to people just where Voyager has been, because its flight path has been more or less a secret to keep all of the other curious aircraft away, and as he prepares to make a little solo run over the tens and tens of thousands of folk who've turned out at Edwards to see him in and see them in, we'd like to tell you that in our Washington studio now is John Pike. He is the associate Director for Space Policy at the Federation of American Scientists. And he's going to talk to us about what we may have learned from Voyager's journey. John Park, what have we learned, except that it is, in the words of Pilot Rutan, an event? Is it any more than an event?
Well, I think it's two things. There's the, I think, emotional significance that we have today after a year in which the American space program really hasn't been doing too good. We have had the feeling that we sort of lost touch with the spirit of Lindbergh and the spirit of the Wright brothers. I think we've seen that we still have that. The combination of technical virtuosity and personal determination that we've had in this country since the Wright brothers, I think that we've seen that demonstrated again today. There are also some practical benefits from this. We've seen that we can build airplanes that are going to stay aloft not simply for hours, but rather for days. You could use an airplane like this to fly over forests to see whether there are forest fires starting, or send an airplane out to fly over the ocean so that fishing fleets can find fish. So I think that this is going to have some long-term practical significance, as well as being a very good Christmas present for the American people.
Not to gainsay anything or to downplay anything, but there was no real new technological breakthrough required for this achievement to have been done, was there?
Well, the breakthrough is a combination of two technologies. The very long, thin wings that Voyager has, that's been around for a long time. We use that on the U-2 spy airplane and on sailplanes and gliders. The fiberglass construction of the Voyager, we're using that on the stealth fighter and the stealth bomber. The breakthrough here was to combine the two. And by combining those two technologies, like I said, you get an airplane that can stay aloft for an unprecedented amount of time.
But then, what do we decide about it in terms of where it leads us? You say it might be good for surveillance of some sort, but we've had surveillance, the U-2, the SR-71s, etc. Is it more a pioneering of the technology or of the spirit of something that, as you mentioned at the outset, we've had some defeats in this long march, and some late defeats as well, and that perhaps the enduring value of it may be the human one?
Well, I think it's both. Certainly the profound sense of, I think, enjoyment that everybody has while we're watching this, a real sense of accomplishment. That's probably the most immediate, important part of it. But you also have that long-term practical impact as well.
Let's listen.
He's going to just zoom right down in front of
Reed, if you can hear me, Voyager just made a pass over the viewing area, and a huge roar went up from the crowd.
Photo chase, you're clear to rejoin. Once more with photo. Put the gear down. Okay.
I mean, right over.
About 3/4 of a mile behind, we're going up.
Greg, we've had the Victory flyover, and we've heard some things from Rutan, some patriotic things as well. This would indicate that apparently they're not in all that bad a shape, either medically, mentally, or physically.
Rutan and Yeager are superhumans, and they have certainly exhibited that throughout 9 days of flight. Much of lost sleep. They only ate 10%, we're told, of their food supply. If you could see inside of the cockpit, it's almost uninhabitable. Yet these two people have done it for 9 days. He just made his, I would believe, his final pass over the landing area. The chase planes have now picked him up. Such a beautiful sight.
Greg, do we know if he's on final now, coming in, or making another pass?
Well, I was getting ready to say that I would assume that this will be the landing phase. He's made basically 2 passes over, one at a higher altitude. He came down and he looked like he was about 1,000 feet in the air on his last pass. So now I would assume that he is in his landing mode.
tape time? 17. I got another tape here. All right, pop tape now.
Hard to believe as you see that vehicle sliding slowly through the sky, not outracing Stinsons or even old Aronkas and Piper Cubs. That this also was a scene for sound barriers being broken, and then some. John Pike, let me ask you a little bit more about the structure of the craft itself. Do you suppose that some have said that this may sort of lead the way to higher use of epoxy and fiberglass, boron, that sort of thing in aircraft? Is that your belief?
Well, we've seen the use of these construction techniques on super-secret military aircraft. There's been some interest in applying them to business aircraft, but I think that the demonstration of the profound potential that this construction technique has, I think that this is going to break a lot of psychological barriers and lead to a much more extensive use in civilian passenger airplanes, helicopters, and business aircraft. It really provides that sort of breakthrough, the conceptual breakthrough needed to enable this technology to get much wider use than it has thus far. People have been sort of resistant to the notion of flying around in a plastic airplane, but now that they've seen that a plastic airplane can fly around the world, maybe they'll realize the potential it has.
When you say flying around, that takes a new meaning on it.
It certainly does in this case.
All right, she is still flying around Edwards Air Force Base, where we keep being reminded that so many other people have done so much experimentation. Northrop with his flying wing that finally brought him to naught there, but which is still flying in a variety of other ways, and may fly again as the advanced technology bomber finally gets unveiled. But the two people aboard are, after all, human beings, Homo sapiens, who are not used to this kind of environment and this kind of life. Dr. Curtis Graber is a research psychologist from the Ames Research Center out in California. Doctor, if you can join us now from the other end of the country, you briefed the pilots before the flight and sort of coached them on living under these extreme conditions. What did you tell them to expect?
Well, actually, we talked to Tina and Dick at NASA Ames about 2 years ago, and they were very concerned about which direction they would fly and problems with the body clock and problems of when they should sleep, when they should fly. And we told them that that kind of confinement and the problems of sleeping in these kinds of conditions could cause extreme fatigue, not to mention the possibility of disruptions of flight due to weather, which of course they really experienced more than they expected.
Right, what was the toughest thing that they had to adjust to, something they couldn't really anticipate or brace themselves for?
Oh, I think the turbulence in the cockpit was the, I would expect, it was the thing that I will say is the most difficult situation. That has a lot of other effects in terms of emotional effects and just physical punishment to the body.
Is there any way you can practice for that or get your mind set to it?
I think the only way you can hope to overcome that is have tremendous dedication to what you're doing and hope you can physically withstand it. And
Maybe
get out of
join the
storm.
NFL.
Join the NFL and get yourself out of the storm system as soon as possible.
What about the mental stress?
Well, the mental stress, I think, is something that's truly remarkable that they've been able to persevere the way they have and succeed. Mental stress is extremely difficult, especially when you have the loss of sleep that they've had and the kind of physical punishment. And the concern I have, and I think a lot of us have, is that as you have more difficult flying situations develop, mechanical problems, or if today had been a difficult weather landing, that mental stress could have had serious impact on their ability to put that plane on the ground.
All right, can you compare this in some way with, say, the confinement and the amount of space allowable per body to, say, the Apollo flights to the moon or other confined space efforts?
Well, it's probably equivalent to some of the Apollo missions, but the difference there is, of course, that you had seats designed for both people that were comfortable and designed to take long-duration flight. And here you have one seat that's very well designed, as I understand it, for comfort, but another position where you're lying somewhat prone, stretched out, and difficult to be comfortable in those kind of conditions.
Did you get to know them well as people and as a team of persons?
No, I really didn't. We spent about a day or two with them, and they came up and discussed some of these issues, and we had some periodic contact after that, but I can't really say I know them well.
Now, what sort of just thumbnail sketch impression did you get of them, though, in the time you did know them?
Well, Dick struck us as a really dedicated, experienced pilot who had a mission to achieve, and Gina the same way. I could say that together they are calm, very reasoned, and had thought this mission out to every last detail that they could. And that kind of preparation is important, and it's what's behind the kind of performance we've seen in this mission over the last several days.
All right, Doctor, let's watch now as the landing gear of Voyager is down. She's making a pass directly toward our cameras at Edwards. It's a clean slice of aerodynamics coming head on, isn't it?
Sure is.
Yeah, stand by.
Air to ground, ground to air now.
Left gear is green.
Outstanding, yeah, we confirm that. The gear is down and locked. I really like your little main gear motor, Dick.
That's a cutie, isn't it? She's one hell of a good pilot, too.
I'll tell you what, Dick, you can say that again 100 times. I concur. The team has it all the way. That team is Jaeger pilot, right?
That's a Jaeger pilot. You bet.
The left landing gear is down. The right one is not yet.
Greg, what do you do about that?
As I understand, it's a mechanical crank down. You do it with your hands. And they have gotten the left one down, and I would imagine they're now working on the right-hand side.
That's the same backup that you have in an airliner if you want to go through all this struggle of it.
Of course, on Voyager, the point of it was to be as light as possible. So in many cases, they only have one system. And they were afraid during this flight that if any one of these critical systems
That's just
went foul,
position now. Anytime you want to turn your little motor on and bring the right gear down, we'll be waiting. Also, Dick, I have a little bone to pick with you. After the scare you gave me this morning, I've got gray hairs all over my head.
This one is particularly gentle because it's come down very even because it has an official NAA gear counter on it to ensure that the airplane did not land some other place for fueling. That little counter has to work. We may have to do it all over again.
You didn't seek landing on some aircraft carrier, did you?
No, once I did a gear up.
Yeah, we have a visual on the right main gear door is open. Yeah, and I can see Gina's doing it very smoothly, and here comes the tire. It's coming into sight.
There comes the right gear down now. You want it down and locked.
Yeah, we see the main gear is about 70% down now.
It reports the gear down, and the pilot reports that the light is green.
Okay, Dick, and we confirm that. We saw it go over center and snap into position. It looks good. Both main gear are down and locked as far as I'm concerned.
And now there's only one way to
Here,
find
the next
out
one is
for
the
sure.
pilot. It gets to lower the nose gear, so we'll try that right now. So the autopilot must come on. Autopilot on, Mark.
Dick, what advice can you give a small plane pilot?
You know you did a good job getting those gear down.
Roger, always put your gear down before we land. That's very good advice. Thank you.
You can see the red track around the familiar map of the world. And that, of course, is the flight of Voyager past. The flight of Voyager present puts it way over there on the left, right at Edwards Air Force Base. Probably 80 miles an hour, maybe less, ground speed. As Rutan works to get the gear down.
1, Voyager 5.
Right gear, left gear, now the nose gear is down.
We show that the nose gear is out, the door is open, and I'm just moving in to check the over center position.
Do that. Recovery crew, take your place on the like bed, please, on the compass road.
Try to get some shots.
And from the north to the south.
All right, Voyager 1-5 here, we are in position. Okay, Dick, I confirm that gear is down and locked, and we were asked to look at the nose gear real carefully because there was some talk of a low-pressure front tire. I disagree with that entirely. I'd say it's blown up just exactly like it was when you left.
Do that. Okay, the Voyager's downwind for landing on the compass road.
Okay, Dick, the chase confirms that you're in the landing configuration, and go get it, boy. This is the big one, the one you've been training for.
This is the big one, yeah. Okay, stand by while Gina completes the checklist.
Reed, a doctor described to me what it was like for these people emotionally, and he said it was like driving around in a Volkswagen Bug for 9 days, nonstop, with 5 children in the back who all need to go to the bathroom at the same time.
Well, that doctor has a vivid imagination, doesn't he? Rutan thinks he has 3 good gear. He's going through his pre-landing checklist. Can't be too extensive because there isn't all that much up there. Voyager's been in the area for more than half an hour now.
The amazing part about it is that they say when the Voyager lands, it will have enough fuel to fly to New York and 1,000 miles beyond.
1 minute, 30 seconds short of 9 days.
You understand that? Just make sure we fly another minute here before we land.
Dick, you're fat on that. My watch was the one that read 8 o'clock when you started the roll, and it's 8 o'clock now.
9 days, huh? 9 days without a shower.
That's disgusting, Dick.
Now, when you build another one, Dick, you ought to put a shower in.
Make it sound worse than, say, 216 hours.
Okay, stand by, guys. We're going to recover this airplane.
Voyager 1, there was charge equals downwind, clear to land, compass rose.
Here, Voyager 1, clear to land on the road. We have 3 green. Checklist is completed. The VRAP for this landing will be 54 knots. 54 knots VRAP with a touchdown of 45. Wow.
So they've been cleared to bring it in.
Mike, you will be right side. Confirmed, Fitz will be on the right side, well clear of him. He's got it now. Okay, fine, I'll be well clear left.
Okay, so I'm going to land parallel to one of those markers that I'm 90 degrees to right now. You concur?
About right.
Okay.
The third one is to the south, but if you happen to line up one that's a little off of that, as long as it's you're happy with it, it's good to run with.
I see what you mean. I'm going around and land due south.
The only way you're coming up through here is essentially due south, so it'll be essentially parallel to that.
Okay, we'll run around to the next one then.
Pilot Rutan is being given several options, apparently, about where he can put it down.
On 5, you have approximately 2 knots from your right rear quarter at the moment.
You can handle that.
A little downwind landing, apparently, in store, but not very much of a wind, as we just heard. 4 miles an hour from the right rear.
This is the circling of the dry lake bed as they communicate with one another. This is not necessarily part of the landing. They could have flown right in and landed it without one circle, but they are choosing to play it on the safe side. And
As you land inside the circle, you're in great shape.
Okay.
And here she comes in for a landing.
You see the line there, just come around till you line up with where the mark is.
After that, I'll land to the right of it.
That's good.
Excellent spot. We just ran it with the van and it's quite smooth.
Quite a contrast. You can hear sonic booms in the back from jets breaking the sound barrier, and here's a plane that travels at just 85, 90 miles an
Got
hour.
wheel height, Fitz.
You're still at least 100 feet there.
Yeah, I concur with that. You're about 100 feet there. Yeah. Let's just line up.
Come
You
on,
can see the
baby.
marks where they were running the van just earlier. You're probably about 75 feet now. That's probably about 40 feet. 30 feet. 15 feet.
Come on, baby.
10 feet. 6 feet.
Yeah!
3 feet.
Down on the ground.
1 foot.
Yeah, he's down.
A feat no one ever thought was possible has occurred here at the Dry Lake Edwards Air Force Base.
Miller time.
Congratulations, Dick. You really did it, boy.
It wasn't the best landing I made, but I walked away from it.
It was gorgeous from where I was sitting.
Okay, ground, where do you want this thing? Voyager 5, where do you want this thing? I lost my radio.
No, you didn't, Dick. How about I would assume a right turn toward the crowd would be kind of nice, don't you?
I have no idea where they want it.
Yeah, I wish somebody would talk. I would head right for the 747 over there. Any tell how you read the Capcom? Hey, line it, sir. Okay, he's wanting to know which way to go here. If he turns right and heads toward the crowd, is that about right?
Voyager 1, this is 5. Just taxi directly toward those 5 towers you see ahead of you over the crowd.
Eddie, this is Capcom. I'm going to go ahead and come around and land here, and I'll land Toward the NASA ramp, but with an aim point behind them, over.
And straight as you go.
The Capcom is landing out here in the compass rose, well behind them.
Straight as you go, Voyager.
Dick Rutan has done the
You got a
events.
visual on me, Dick.
I don't. Wave your hand. Belly hole.
He said he was looking forward to doing for 6 years, along with Gina Yeager, his co-pilot. Plane landed at exactly 8:06 and 18 seconds Pacific time. Almost to the minute when it took off 9 days ago from Edwards Air Force Base. 4-minute gap. It took off at 8:02.
With the NAA officials.
Hello, I'm Bob Kane at CNN headquarters in Atlanta. We've just seen history made, the landing of the experimental aircraft Voyager after a 9-day round-the-world, non-stop and non-refueled flight. Joining us live by telephone now from his home in California is Chuck Yeager, the test pilot we came to know so well, those of us who did not before at least, in the movie The Right Stuff. Colonel Yeager, are you there? Do you hear me? Chuck Yeager? We had established telephone contact with Chuck Yeager. Do you hear me, Mr. Yeager? He cannot hear us. All right, we will try to reestablish contact with Colonel Yeager, who must know so well many of the feelings and motivations that have been felt over the course of the past 9 days by Gina Yeager, no relation, and Dick Rutan, who carried out their own unprecedented non-stop flight around the world. A very different kind of flight from that performed by Commander Yeager throughout his career and the other test pilots to whom Edwards Air Force Base in California is home. Theirs usually involve a great deal of speed, aerodynamics, and extraordinarily high technology, whereas this one involved largely technology we've known for some time, simply a blending of human determination and blends of different kinds of technologies that made this unprecedented mission possible. We're rejoining Greg LaMotte now, who's been standing by live at Edwards Air Force Base on the Mojave Desert in California. Greg?
Bob, the pilots have now turned off the engines, as you can see. Around the plane is Peter Riva, Voyager spokesperson and very close friends to Dick and Gina. They have yet to remove the little bubble over the cockpit, but they are doing so now. And what we will hear is... Here it is 2 days before Christmas, and an estimated some 50,000 people came out here in the coldness of the desert floor, and dark, and it was misting this morning, a little bit of snow. Even so, it was 2 days before Christmas. They were willing to make the trek to see history being made.
Hey, Lee, move to the right a little.
It should be interesting to see their reaction to when they get on the ground, because we've been told after this period of time they might not be able to walk. There's an ambulance, 2 ambulances standing by from the Edwards Air Force Base to take them away and have them checked out for a couple of hours. What a flight. No one ever thought it'd be possible. And Dick Rutan and Jeannie Yeager, along with their brother, or along with Bert Rutan, who is Dick's brother, proved them all wrong. One can indeed fly around the world without refueling or stopping. They are having a quick conversation there with Peter Riva and Dick Rutan. Jeannie Yeager is stashed away in the back, and she'll emerge right after Dick.
Hey, Cole? Yeah. You got a good shot, or do you want me to take it for you? I think I can get it. Okay. See the GPS antenna right above the logo? Yeah, that King antenna.
After this much time in the air and all that they've been through, the rough weather and the fears, not being able to make it, fears about the gasoline supplies, and rear engine going out on them, a 3,000-foot fall before being able to get the front engine turned on. This may be an emotional scene here, a wide range of emotions experienced by the crew, and this may be the one that tops them all when they emerge from the flight.
Out all the way.
Although Dick Rutan is a pretty cool cookie.
Lift up on the ladder a bit. Out all the way. There we go.
There's big go right there.
Hey, Diane. Thank you.
Before the flight, I asked Rutan if he had fears. Here he comes out of the plane. Cowboy hat and all. Removing his parachute.
You did great. How wobbly do you feel? How wobbly do you feel?
For 6 years, they wanted their day in the sun, and this morning they've gotten it right here on the dry lake bed. Edwards Air Force Base. And here comes Gina.
So aren't we supposed to have stretchers right here? Sit.
Their legs appear somewhat wobbly. We'll have to see
Say to America as you pull in.
what the condition is when they hit the desert floor.
It's really good to be back.
I guess the first question is, how does one feel after spending 9 days in an airplane?
Like a shower. Like a shower. I'm going to sit here for a while, Doc.
Damn, you're ready to. Yeah. I'm surprised. How do you feel?
Hey, baby.
Not busy at all? Beautiful. Oh, neat. You guys did it.
What did we do it? Dick, was there ever any doubt that you'd make it?
Many times.
At what point? What would you say was maybe the low point, or your most fearful time?
Well, over Africa, when we decided that due to some type of anomaly with the airplane, we didn't even have enough fuel to go across the Atlantic Ocean. We spent about a half a day and feeling pretty bad about that. But then we figured out where all the fuel was hiding. Then we felt better.
Where did you find it?
Well, it had a backflow problem, and it wasn't indicated properly. We really had the fuel, but we didn't know it. And I felt pretty bad at that time.
How did everything hold up for you? The engines, the fuel?
They're all turning. They're all turning, and we made it. I would have liked to have a little more fuel at the end, but...
Yeah, I was going to say, if you had anything to do differently, what do you think it would be?
Put it pressurized, make the cabin a lot bigger, and go at high altitude. There's a lot of weather in this world at 8,000 feet.
And you hit it off.
Boy, I tell you.
I think so.
Wait till you see some of the pictures of it. You snaked right down the hole of the needle, I'll tell you.
You'll have to pardon me. I want to sit here for a while. I don't know if I can stand up or not.
Feel free. If there's is there anything you want to say, this is your chance. They're all watching. They're all listening to you.
Keep those muscles going in your legs.
No, it's really great to be here. I'm sure. Well, I'm really overwhelmed with all the people.
Your legs feel numb, Dick?
Yeah, they do. I was wondering about whether I'm going to be able to get a ride to get home tonight or not. That's not.
The ocean's a place to fly for laminar flow. Your leading edges are very clean.
Are they?
Yes, sir. That's one of the things that helped us get around the world. We didn't pick up much bugs on the leading edges.
Get the bear grass?
See, I spent about 5 years worried about those bear grass. Because without those, you got to do it all over again.
Couple more waves, you know.
All right. No.
Yeah, just grab his shoulder here.
I'm okay. This one's down.
Head first.
No, don't go head first.
Do something spectacular for the crowd.
Think what could possibly be next after this?
I mean, besides a long shower and a shave,
Besides a long shower and shave.
that must look terrible.
Sitting on a nice white
Nice one.
I didn't believe it.
Put a few more on there now.
Okay, I'll go there in a few minutes.
Gina, how are you feeling up there?
Right now, really good. I'm kind of taking it easy, too. I'll say he does.
I heard you took a lot of bumps and bruises during the turbulence.
I know it was going to be 6 years. I don't know.
What was the high point?
Pilot, you did it on flash money. That's what knocks me out. Glad I could be here for the Congress to welcome you back. Good.
You got it. That's what 3 people can do, right?
You betcha. No, we're really proud of you. First day back, don't make me speech.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I thought it felt pretty good.
The flight of the Voyager. 9 days ago, it started at Edwards Air Force Base at 8:02 in the morning.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It has ended here 9 days later at 8:06 in 18 seconds. Crew, pilots Dick Rutan and Gina Yeager, done something that was thought impossible. They went through rough weather. They had engine failure, fears of low fuel supplies, extreme fatigue, emotions running from every end of the scale. They have fought their way all the way around the world, and they have endured, setting aviation history. Voyager has landed safely with its crew on the ground, aviation history in their pocket. Go now back to Bob Kane in Atlanta. Bob.
Greg, standing by in our bureau in San Francisco is Dr. Curtis Graber. He is an aviation psychologist with the Ames Research Center in California. He advised co-pilots Rutan and Yeager on how to prepare themselves psychologically and perhaps to an extent physiologically even for their flight. Dr. Graber, we understand you've been able to see but not hear a great deal of what has just transpired at Edwards Air Force Base. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, we saw and heard primarily Dick Rutan in terms of speech, referring to specific little phenomena that he'd encountered and so on, but very little jubilation or excitement at the feat he has accomplished. How do you account for that?
Well, I think under that kind of stress he's been under, the emotional drain he's been under, there probably isn't much emotion left. And I think what he really is looking for is a nice shower and some rest, and the jubilation will come, I'm sure, as he recovers emotionally from this whole experience.
Is he wound up tight as a spring or just the reverse right now?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
Would you say he's wound up tight as a spring or just the reverse?
I would say just the reverse. I think he's glad he had nice weather and he got it down on the ground. There's a tremendous sense of relief, and I'm sure, as you say, the jubilation will come.
Okay, Dr. Graber, 9 days in what we keep referring to as a bathtub-sized cockpit. Just the two of them. Terribly close proximity under very difficult conditions. Can you liken this to anything else that we're more familiar with?
Well, I think it's difficult to liken it to anything else today. You know, we have people in submarines, people living under sea in oil well situations in the Antarctica, but they all have more space than that. I think there's one thing that shouldn't be ignored here is that you had a co-ed couple up there, which may have made it a little easier to tolerate. I'm not sure it would have been quite as easy to tolerate if there had been two men, for instance, flying that airplane.
I was wondering if just the reverse might not be true. You say no. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Well, it's interesting in looking at some of the Soviet experience in space. They've often commented sometimes that the mood mellows a bit and things get easier along when you have a co-ed crew. And I've heard talk from some of our astronauts of the same kind of thing. So it's an area that's interesting, and they've known each other for a long time. They prepared together for this trip for a long time, and I think there are pros and cons either way.
They are also personally close, are they not?
They are, yes they are.
How did you advise them, Dr. Graber? You advised them some time before they began their flight. In fact, even as they began their training. How could you advise them how to prepare for this?
Well, we advised them, as I said, 2 years ago, and I'm sure there are many other advisors as well, but one of the things we did suggest, despite the meteorological conditions, was that they should go in a westward direction. So they would continually be lengthening their day, which is more advantageous to the body clock as opposed to going eastward. They were concerned about, I guess you could call it prop lag in this case, as opposed to jet lag. And the other issue is about how long they should get rest. We said they should try to get at least, if they could at a time, maybe 6 hours sleep. I think the turbulence made that very difficult. And the other concern was about hydration and nutrition, of course, but I'm sure that the team flight surgeon was particularly involved in that aspect.
We had an incident earlier in the flight after about between 2 and 3 days into the flight, Dr. Graber, where Dick Rutan was reported unwilling to give up the controls, even though he'd had only about 3 hours sleep in something like 60 hours. Did you hear that at the time, and what did you think of it when you heard it?
Well, I heard it at the time. I think it's a combination of the sleep deficit that he had and his concern about the safety of the aircraft. It's interesting that 2 years ago we discussed this mission. Dick was very concerned about the fatigue side and how it might affect his behavior. He had commented on an earlier record-breaking solo mission about 3 or 4 years ago where he actually got so tired about 1 o'clock in the morning on the second night that he saw the spaceship pull up and the little green men walking on his wing. And he was very concerned about hallucinating. So I'm quite surprised that he stayed in the seat, but I think he got so involved in what he was doing and concerned for the safety that that overrode what logic would prevail.
You were not chagrined then by anything you saw or heard there?
Well, I was a bit chagrined, and I think it took an amazing effort to get him out of that seat. It's a warning to a lot of people. When you get that tired, sometimes you don't listen to reason. Finally, he did get out, and I'm glad he did. He needed the rest.
All right, thanks for talking with us, Dr. Graber. Curtis Graber, aviation psychologist at the Ames Research Center in California. We're going to switch now to Reed Collins in Washington. Reed.
Thank you, Bob. As we watch Mr. Rutan being coaxed into his little ambulance for the ride back and the physical post-flight checkup that he and Gina Yeager are going to have prior to their news conference, which, by the way, CNN will be carrying live. We'd like to complete the sort of wrap-up of the day of the 9 days with John Pike, the Federation of American Scientists Associate Director for Space Policy. I'm wondering if we can say, John, what is left to do? Where is another frontier, or have we crossed them all?
Well, this looks like one of the last American airplanes that's going to be going into the Smithsonian. We had the Wright brothers, the first to fly, Lindbergh, the first to cross the Atlantic, Columbia, the first to go to the moon, and now Voyager, the first to fly around the world unrefueled. Some of those other airplanes in the Smithsonian Museum, I think, are a triumph of technology. This one's going to be in the Smithsonian as a triumph of the human spirit.
So we're sort of back to the Wright brothers in a way, aren't we? Back into the early 1900s.
Well, I think here we're back to Lindbergh, the lone eagle crossing the Atlantic, except today, rather than a lone eagle, we've got 2 American eagles.
Remarkable sociological advance, too. I wonder what Paris and New York and the world would have said had Mr. Lindbergh emerged from his aircraft in the company of a woman, not his wife, as they say.
Yes, indeed.
So, let us find out then, as they prepare to hang it up, the flight, the records, the books, and as they prepare to put another space aside in the Smithsonian for Voyager 1, we can perhaps say that we've seen something happen today that has never been done before, certainly, that's been said before, need probably never be done again. Nobody seems to recall who was second to doing almost anything. And here is the landing again.
Down on the ground.
and a little puff of history is blown away like the dust on a dry lake bed. But we saw it, and we saw it here.
Is it green?
We have Lee here.
And as all Voyagers must, now the medics will poke and thrust. And they'll be bothered, and they'll be allowed finally to shower, something that Rutan wanted first and mostest when he got out of the cockpit. And then later he'll be asked and probed some more intellectually about his impressions of the flight. What did he remember? What was the worst part? What was the best part? She, too, will be asked these same questions, and they'll have to grope for answers. These people are basically adventurers, engineers, doers, planners, and perhaps not talkers so much. I think we'll probably find that, as in most cases of people who can do, the descriptive capacity may not be all that everybody wants of them. But they have done it. And they were the first two, the only two, get all the way around this tired old world of ours without refueling, without stopping, without being daunted by all the weather that exists in this globe. So they're back in time, if they haven't done it, to do some Christmas shopping and rejoin the rest of us who toil away here on this earth. Voyager 1, flight is over. It's a record.
This is CNN, the world's most important network.
We're going back and cover the end of the flight and the beginning of all of the hoopla as Voyager 1 has made it all the way around the world on one load of fuel. My colleague, CNN's Greg Lamont, is at Edwards Air Force Base. Greg?
Great. It's an amazing story of struggle, endurance, trying to overcome obstacles all the way around the globe, and they have done so, with Voyager now sitting on the Mojave Desert floor, landing at 8:06 this morning. With me is Lee Heron, a very close friend of Dick Rutan and Jeannie Yeager's. He's also the Voyager technician. A few tears for you.
Afraid so. 9 days and 5 minutes of real highs and real lows, and no, I'm not glad it's over, but I'm glad we got it done.
You greeted them as they got out of the plane. Anything in particular that struck you most?
Yeah, their general just whacked out smiles. I mean, they were gone. I don't think they had anything on their mind but just smiling and feeling great. And all of us just had kind of one word, is finally.
I noticed that Dick got out and he also kissed the engines.
Oh, no pilot walks away from his bird without checking the whole thing over. And if you notice, he went through the whole airplane. And it's just part and parcel of his life.
Of course, the wingtips were damaged from the outset, right at the takeoff. Dick checked those out. Did he have any comment to make about that?
Yeah, the damage is actually worse than we thought it was. And it's quite dramatic if you get into the structure and things like that. We were back to the one tank on the left side. But she held together, and that graphite airplane did its job.
The bird held together, but we were talking about all the bumps and the bruises and the cuts and injuries that Jeannie Yeager, more so than Dick, possibly suffered. Did any injuries visible to you?
Not visible, no, but Gina is down a bit as far as her pep and things. You can see that, and was visibly affected by the flight as far as her get up and go. I couldn't think of a better word, but she's in the ambulance with the doctors, and she's quite happy and smiling and recognizes everybody, so I don't see any problem. We'll be back here in a couple hours.
Lee, earlier we were talking about statements that have been made in the past in history-making events, the first man on the moon and his comments, those of Lindbergh's. They were wondering if Dick Rutan would be the kind of person to wax poetic when he touched the ground. He is not that kind of person, is he?
Oh, he is, but I think he did it on the first pass when he flew over the crowd and told us what we were here and what we were all about. And that's the way it is here. I mean, it's he got out and to me said, well, 5, we made it. And that's all we needed.
Your feelings about the whole flight?
I wouldn't give away a minute of it or trade a second of it with anybody.
Lee Heron, the Voyager technician, did such an outstanding job. It couldn't have been done without the volunteers that gave their time, expert volunteer help. They got $1, $2 donations from all over the country to help finance this baby. And it has become a reality. Voyager has sailed around the Earth in 9 days. It never stopped. It never took on any added fuel. And it's never been done before. And as we were discussing earlier, it would appear now that the bird is destined for the Smithsonian, along with the Spirit of St. Louis and the Wright Brothers plane. Reporting live from Mojave, or I should say Edwards Air Force Base, Greg Lamont, CNN.
Thank you very much, Greg. Yeager and Rutan are scheduled to hold a news conference in about 2 hours from now in California, as soon as they undergo some medical checks. And you can see that press conference right here on CNN on Take 2. And Take 2 will also have continuing coverage of the flight of the Voyager. We'll see if there's any excitement on Wall Street right now. Bill Hartley's there. Good morning, Bill. The incredible journey of the experimental plane Voyager ended in the California desert just a short time ago, 9 days after pilots Gene Yeager and Dick Rutan took off. Rutan admitted to a shaky landing, but appeared very glad to be on the ground. He and Yeager had a scare early this morning when an engine stalled, causing the spindly aircraft to lose 3,400 feet of altitude. During that time, fuel leaked into the plane's cabin, and the pilots were forced to wear oxygen masks for the rest of the journey. Yeager and Rutan covered some 25,000 miles without stopping and without refueling, the first plane in the history of aviation to circle the world in that fashion.
President Reagan was watching along with the other millions. He was in his little study, which is just off the Oval Office in the White House, and he has had reaction to the Voyager flight, according to the White House spokesman Mark Weinberg, who issued a statement from the president, saying it was magnificent, absolutely magnificent. Gina Yeager and Dick Rutan's courage, determination, and refusal to give up have thrilled and impressed us all. He goes on to say in his statement, they are a living example of American pioneerism at its best. Welcome home, the president said in his statement. It is also believed that he may attempt a phone call and a discussion with them personally later in the day.
The Voyager's landing ends months of struggle on and off the ground to fulfill a dream. Ralph Wenge looks at the making of the Voyager mission.
The flight into the history books was not always an easy one for the pilots and designers of Voyager. First came the problem of finding corporate sponsors to help pay for the expensive craft. That was solved. Then came problems in testing. In July, Voyager successfully flew a 4.5-day test flight over the Mojave Desert, and the round-the-world trip seemed all set to go. But then, a series of minor problems culminating in a major failure of the propeller system. The summer flight was canceled. Rescheduled to meet changing weather patterns that would have forced the postponement until spring, Voyager began its flight on December 14th. But before it could get into the air, a potentially disastrous problem occurred. Weighted down from the tons of fuel needed to fly around the world, Voyager's wingtips scraped the ground. The plane almost ran out of runway before taking off. But once in the air, flight engineers decided to use the wind to rip off the damaged wingtips. It worked, and Voyager was off. But the problems were not over. Fuel gauge readings led pilots Dick Rutan and Gina Yeager to think they were running low. The gauge was wrong. Noise from the engines drove the pilots to distraction at times and made resting almost impossible. Turbulence over Africa and the Atlantic Ocean nearly forced the craft down. And the rear engine overheated Saturday because the fatigued pilots forgot to add oil. This flight has been called as risky as any of the pioneering flights of Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart. Much has been learned about aircraft construction, engines, and fuel. And those involved with Voyager say, like the flights of the early aviators, Voyager's travels will change the future of aviation. Ralph Wenge, CNN, reported.
The weather at the time of landing on the Mojave was certainly ideal.
It was a pretty landing, too. It's 46 minutes past the hour now. And Valerie Voss is here to talk about the weather in California and everywhere. Good morning, Valerie.
Now back to Daywatch on CNN.
Let's briefly recap the hours and the day's lead story. The much heralded and much troubled mission of the experimental aircraft Voyager is over, and it is a resounding success. The Voyager came in for a perfect landing this morning at 11:06 Eastern Time at Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert in California. The plane had completed 9 days, almost to the minute, flying around the world well over 25,000 miles. The 9-day flight was plagued by turbulence, fuel uncertainties, fatigue, headwinds, and at the last minute, vapor lock, which caused both engines to shut down and the plane to go into a dramatic and frightening free fall for about 3,500 feet before the engines were restarted and it was brought under control. Dick Rutan was at the controls when the plane touched down on the Mojave this morning. He and co-pilot Gina Yeager emerged shortly thereafter, unsteadily, but obviously pleased, perhaps a little emotionally drained from 9 days under the circumstances in which they had been in. Those circumstances included confinement in what has come to be called a bathtub-sized cockpit, buffeted continually by turbulence, occasional headwinds, and other kinds of problems. Voyager is home, the first plane ever to fly around the world nonstop, unrefueled.
Rutan and Yeager are going to be holding a news conference. You'll be able to see that here live on CNN during Take 2. Also, Dave and Lois are going to be talking with representative of the Flat Earth Society that says Voyager couldn't have flown around the world because the world isn't round. I'm Owen McCoy.
I'm Bob Kane. Thank you for being with us.